Good morning and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Jason Rezaian. I'm an opinions writer here at the Washington Post. I'm honored today to be joined by Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman to discuss a very important topic: ongoing efforts to bring home wrongfully detained Americans and those held hostage abroad. Deputy Secretary Sherman, welcome to Washington Post Live.
Thank you, Jason. It's good to be with you. It's particularly good to be with you in Washington, D.C., rather than you being in a prison cell in Tehran.
Before we begin, I think it's worth noting that Deputy Secretary Sherman is joining us today in her diplomatic capacity and I in a journalistic one, but we share a unique backstory. As many of you might know, when I was the bureau chief for the Post in Tehran, I was wrongfully detained for 544 days. During much of that time, Deputy Secretary Sherman was the lead negotiator in ongoing negotiations between the U.S., Iran, and other world powers over Iran's nuclear program, and had a lot to do with efforts to bring me home. So this is personal for both of us, and I'm really excited to have you on the program today.
Thank you. Great to be
So
with you.
I want to start by asking a question about the recent executive order around hostage and wrongful detentions that President Biden announced over the summer. He declared this a national emergency. Why now? What's changed in recent months or years that has made this such a critical issue?
I think we've seen governments use hostage taking as a tool, as a weapon, to leverage things from the United States of America. And the president, just like Secretary Blinken, understands in a very powerful way what this means for families when their loved ones are taken in this way, when they are wrongfully detained. You know, the United States has a responsibility to care for American citizens wherever they are in the world, whether they lose their passport and need help, whether they find themselves in legal jeopardy, or if they find themselves wrongfully detained, and a number of other circumstances as well. That is a fundamental responsibility of the United States. Um, but the president, in addition, just feels in the most heartfelt way that he has to do everything he can to bring Americans home who are wrongfully detained. I think most people know, because it's in the press, that he's meeting today, in fact, with the family of Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan to talk with them about our ongoing efforts to bring them home from Russia. And so the president wants to do everything possible, and Secretary Blinken does as well. So this executive order was a way to give the administration new tools to have the whole of government approach, to use everything we have possible to ensure that we get every single American home who has been unjustly detained.
Just yesterday, I was up on the Hill giving testimony to members of Congress on this very issue. And you talk about the whole of government approach. As the caseload increases, more and more members of Congress have constituents who have been affected by this. Dozens currently, and probably more than 150 or so over the past few years. So I do think that there is a rising consciousness around this issue that we haven't seen before. But one of the things that President Biden wrote in the executive order is that this is an economic and a national security threat. I think previously we always thought of this as a personal problem that affects a handful of Americans. But talk about the geopolitical dimensions of this and the challenges of balancing those two aspects of it.
Well, as you know, Jason, one of the things that Secretary Blinken has done is to create what we call a D indicator in our travel advisories to Americans who are traveling abroad. We have 9 risk indicators for Americans who are traveling, whether it may be that there's a health issue that they should be aware of, whether in fact there is an issue of crime or kidnapping. But now we have a D indicator if in fact a country is using the detention, unjust detention of Americans as leverage, economic leverage, geopolitical leverage. Those countries that currently have a D indicator are Burma, the People's Republic of China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and Venezuela. So what we're saying is these are countries that have held Americans that under the Levinson Act, which was passed in honor of Robert Levinson, you know this case well, an American who has been missing in Iran for many years now. And so the Levinson Act basically gave us a framework for dealing with these illegal, unjust detentions and ensuring that we take action to bring Americans home. So the D indicator is one more tool to say to Americans, know that if you travel to these countries, even though many of these countries already have a do not travel, we want
Yeah.
people to understand why they shouldn't travel to a given country. And countries that unjustly detain Americans over a period of time or in numbers get that D indicator. And we hope
I,
Americans pay attention.
I want to follow up on that. It's a very important development, and I think Americans, when they decide to travel abroad, they should consult the State Department's website for advice on recommendations how to protect themselves, places that they should or should not go. But there are several countries that we have friendly relationships with that have done this over the years as well. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. At what point might we see countries like those or others on this list? I mean, is this a static list, or is it one that could grow or contract if these countries change their policies?
This is not a static list. Countries can, as we say, sort of graduate to getting a D indicator if they do this on a regular basis, if they do it over time, if they increase the numbers. There are certain steps in this effort, so it won't be static. And one of the things I really want people to understand, and Jason, you know this very personally, I'm going to ask you a question in a minute, is that we take each of these circumstances and make a determination about whether someone has been unjustly detained and meets the requirements of the Levinson Act. It's not every American who might be jailed, because sometimes Americans do things that are illegal, that are crimes, and it is not an unjust detention. But we look at things like, have they gotten a fair trial, a fair judicial process? Have they been leveraged and weaponized in geopolitical terms? Are they getting harsh treatment that doesn't befit whatever has gone on? Are they being used in a way to make a political point? All of these are part of what goes in to the Secretary of State making a determination if somebody has been unjustly detained. And then we look at each country and figure out the best strategy. We have an entire office led by Ambassador Roger Carstens, and their entire job is to think about, work on, deal with these cases every single day. It is a very high priority for the president, very high priority for the Secretary of State. And I guess it would probably be helpful to those listening to hear from you, Jason, about what it's like to be someone who is unjustly detained and how you keep your hope up, how your family kept their hope up while this was going on.
Well, it's rare for me to be put in the hot seat like that, but I'm happy to answer that question. It's a horrible fate to be an American detained abroad completely unjustly without the opportunity or the resources to properly defend yourself. In my case, I was being held in Iran with the entire Islamic Republic's resources being weaponized against me. Their judiciary, their foreign ministry, when they would come speak in public about their ongoing negotiations with the United States, would throw me, deeper into the ditch that I was already in. Their propaganda networks at home, sullied my reputation. They even produced a 30-episode television series about my supposed crimes. It's a horrible thing, and I think that that's not something that most Americans can actually comprehend. But unfortunately, a growing number of us are. A question that I have is, Secretary Blinken has spoken often about the deterrence to this practice. You and I have spoken about what we can do as the United States of America with partner countries to make this practice less attractive and costlier for nation states who do it. And I know, without telegraphing what's going on behind the scenes, there's a lot of work happening on this. How much of it can you share with us?
Well, what I can share is you're absolutely right. One of the things that Secretary Blinken has charged all of us with is to make sure that this isn't only about dealing with individual cases, but that we develop policy and try to establish a norm around the world that this is not something that countries should do. Led really by Canada, which had some of its own cases, best known as the two Michaels, that were held in the People's Republic of China, who were eventually freed. Canada has led the way in putting together a declaration that's signed on by over 60 countries now. And we are working with the Canadians and others to perhaps put together a collection of countries that can really work all around the world to say that this is a norm that should be established, that people should not be taken and be used as a tool for geopolitical, economic, or any other reason for that matter.
This, as you know, is a subject that I've been thinking a lot about since my release almost 7 years ago. You and I have been discussing it since almost that time, along with colleagues of yours from the Obama administration, now from the Biden administration, folks in the Trump administration. It's something that I think about a lot. And one of the ideas that keeps coming up in conversations is, this is a practice that's been going on for thousands of years. Some people believe that it's a problem without a solution. I get the sense for the first time that we are dealing with an administration who believes that while they might not know exactly what the solution is, it's out there somewhere. Is that fair to say? And is the consensus within the State Department, the NSC, Homeland Security, and the White House that we can figure this problem out?
There's certainly a determination to do that, Jason. It's not simple. I don't want to kid people. This is hard because we really have to work all over the globe to say that this is not a tool that governments should use, that human beings are not bargaining chips and should not be unjustly detained in these ways and used in these ways. When people ask me what's the hardest thing about being in my role or being a diplomat, I've been lucky enough, this is the fifth Secretary of State I've had the ability to work for and with. The hardest thing I do is meeting with families. I met with and talked with your family, your brother, on a regular basis, as you know, who was a tremendous advocate for you, as was the rest of your family, just never stopped pushing. I've met with Austin Tice's mother. I've met with others, many of the Iranian families of the four that are currently detained unjustly in Iran that we're trying to get out. These are brutal meetings. I've met with Christine Levinson. These are just brutal meetings because uh, the pain is so deep and so difficult. And I'm sure that the president's meeting today with the Whalens and with Griner's wife will just be heartbreaking because you want to do everything you can to get Americans home. And then you want to work as hard as you can to really establish a norm around the world and an imperative that countries not use this tool. It is really not a tool, it is a horror show for the people who are imprisoned and for the families who are desperate for their release.
I think that you hit the nail on the head. This is a two-pronged problem, right? Um, the the safe, healthy, speedy return of Americans, and the long-term problem of trying to make this harder in the long run. We see the case numbers rising almost exponentially. And I want to ask a question about China. Right now, human rights groups believe that there are at least 200 Americans who are under travel bans, unable to leave China to come back. Dozens of others wrongfully detained. We already have a tense relationship with China. There's so many issues that we have to deal with. Um, how do you factor this into that with the myriad of other problems that we're faced with on a daily basis?
It is a high priority, as I think you know. Probably quite some months ago, I went to Tianjin. I've been fortunate to be the senior American official who's actually gone to China during this administration because it has been a very difficult relationship. Out of the conversations that I had with Foreign Minister Wang Yi and with Vice Minister Jiafang, a set of working groups were set up and led by a State Department official on our side. And those working groups were dealt with a number of issues. And one of them was these exit bans and Americans who we believe were unjustly detained. And we have made some progress. It is hard work. One has to figure out what's meaningful to the PRC that would help to get Americans home. We are going to continue to work those cases. The president raised those cases in his conversation by name with President Xi Jinping. Secretary Blinken has raised those cases by name in his meetings with Wang Yi. Jake Sullivan has raised those cases by name with State Councilor Yang Yuchur. And we are continuing to work on them. As I've said, we've had some success, and we will continue to work hard to deal with all of those cases.
Talk a bit about the tightening bonds between Moscow and Beijing, and how we are going um, to meet those challenges in the short term, the medium term, and the long term.
Well, that's a very big question. I
I
certainly
understand.
don't have all the answers today. But what I will say is that, there's no doubt we've just seen President Putin and President Xi Jinping meet in Samarkand on the margins of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. Um, I think that this is a relationship of convenience, not necessarily one of trust, or one that will combine their efforts on all things. It was quite interesting that President Putin made a remark that he knew that Xi Jinping had concerns about what he was doing in Ukraine. Very interesting for Putin to say that. I'm sure that Xi Jinping is looking for advantage while Russia is continuing its unprovoked, premeditated, and horrifying invasion of Ukraine, a sovereign country. Because Xi Jinping has constantly talked about sovereignty and territorial integrity. So this doesn't square with the principles that he wants for his own views, whether it's about Hong Kong or Tibet or Taiwan. So I think this is not a full-flown marriage in all ways, shapes, and form, but they are certainly going to work together. But they will also work for advantage with each other. Many people believe, and it's been in the papers, that China is looking to press advantage in Central Asia because of Russia's attention elsewhere in the world. So we will have to work hard at this. Secretary Blinken gave a speech several weeks ago that set out our framework on our relationship with the PRC. We certainly want to align with our partners and allies around the world. We want to compete with China on America's future and the future of the world. But we want to do that under the rules-based international order, not the set of rules that China is trying to create for its own self, even though it has risen in part because of that rules-based order. We will cooperate with the PRC when it's in our interest on issues like climate change and global health. But there is definitely going to be a very decisive decade here, as the president says, as we deal with this pacing challenge. We also have to invest. The third pillar of this strategy is to invest at home. We've seen what President Biden has done in investing in infrastructure at home, the recent Inflation Reduction Act to really help Americans here at home, what we've done in the CHIPS Act to make sure that we grow our semiconductor industry, that we deal with supply chain issues around the world so that we have resilience here at home for whatever comes. The president is putting in place all of the pieces of the puzzle to make sure that we are strong at home and we are able to compete abroad.
Thank you for that. I want to turn back to Iran, which is the subject that brought you and I together in the first place. Nuclear talks seem to have stalled again. Coming into the new administration in 2021, there was a lot of hope that we would be able to quickly rejoin the JCPOA. For a lot of different reasons, that's become complicated. Do you think we'll get back to it? I understand that diplomacy is never something that you're going to fully abandon, but what are the prospects at this point?
Well, we're at a stalemate in the sense that Iran, in the latest round of negotiations, have given us back a pretty tough response, one that's unacceptable to us. We've sent back a message about what we believe is necessary and what are critical elements here. And this is in Iran's court. The president will continue to look for ways to move forward as long as we believe that it makes sense to do so. We are planning for any eventuality, whether the deal happens or the deal doesn't happen. The president still believes it is in our interest to pursue the deal and will continue to do so as long as that is the case. I want to say two really important things. The President of the United States, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, believe that Iran must never get a nuclear weapon. We believe that returning to the JCPOA is the best way to ensure that, but we will be prepared for every eventuality if the deal does not come to pass. And the second thing I want to say, going back to the original purpose of this conversation, is getting families reunited and people home is a very high priority, the highest priority in many ways. And it is not dependent upon whether the JCPOA happens or doesn't happen. We are pursuing bringing Americans unjustly detained in Iran home, regardless of what happens with the JCPOA. And that work is continuing and will continue until those Americans are safe and home and back with their families.
I don't want to press for too many details about efforts beyond the ones that we see publicly, but I am the recipient of those sorts of efforts that were done behind closed doors, efforts that you initiated, and I hope that that kind of will exist. Siamak Namazi, who was detained along with me at that time, now coming up on 7 years in prison, wrote in an op-ed not too long ago. I can conclude only that with greater political will and courage from the White House, we could have been home a year ago. My heart breaks every time I see Siamak Namazi's name, every time I speak with a member of his family. And I certainly hope that that they are reunited as quickly as humanly possible.
There's nothing that I can say that takes away that pain. That's very real. And I have spoken, as I said, with many of the families, and it is one of the hardest things any of us do, because I understand what Siamak Namazi has written. What I can say to him, to his family, to you, is that there is an ongoing effort with great determination and enormous focus to bring him home, his father as well, and the other Americans that are unjustly detained in Iran.
We are just about out of time. Deputy Secretary, I've really appreciated the opportunity. You and I have been trying to do this for quite some time, and I'm glad that we were able to make schedules align. And it's such an important issue, one that that affects all Americans, whether they know it or not. I appreciate you offering your insights and time today.
Thank you, Jason. I am really grateful that you continue to put a spotlight on this really tough issue. You bring your own horrifying personal experience to it, but you also bring your journalistic know-how to keep the focus on this, make sure Americans know that they think about where they travel and what they do, and that they give their support to these families who are so desperate to have their loved ones home. And I just want to leave everyone with the message that this is such a high priority for the president, for the Secretary of State. And every day we are focused on everything we can do to solve each of these problems case by case. They're all different. They all take different strategies, but we are determined. And we're determined as well to create a norm so that someday this does not continue to happen.
Well, thank you to all of you for joining today. To learn more about our upcoming programming, please go to WashingtonPostLive.com. I'm Jason Rezaian. Have a good weekend.